Welcome to our devotional on Psalm 24. This is another psalm attributed to David, as are fully half of all the psalms. If you're not an expert in biblical archaeology, you might find elements of this psalm a bit confusing, but it does make sense in beautiful ways, both in its own day and later on in a prophetic fulfillment more than 1,000 years in the future. The psalm has three obvious divisions. It opens by declaring that the world and everything in it belongs to the Lord who created it all. It then takes an abrupt change of focus in the next 4 verses to consider the question, who shall ascend to the hill of the Lord? Quickly answering, he who has clean hands and a pure heart. The last 4 verses finally describe an apparent exchange between the Lord himself and those controlling the entrance to the gates of the city. Thousands of years separate us from the time this was written and the present day. Descriptions that would have been obvious to an inhabitant of Israel at that time may seem strange and unfamiliar to us. The earth being founded upon the seas was the common pagan view at that time. Modern concepts of astronomy were a long way off. But these verses make it clear that the earth, sea, and rivers are God's creations and not godlike creatures to be worshipped. In the time of David, the hill of the Lord would have been the hill where the tent of meeting was located that David erected to house the Ark of the Covenant. The gates or doors referred to in this final section of the psalm would have referred to the entrance to the city of David where the tent of meeting was found. This all fits with the traditional view that this psalm celebrated the return of the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem after it had been recovered from the Philistines. The assembly restoring the Ark to its proper resting place would have been joyously praising God for having brought back the Ark from their enemies. They would have been very self-conscious of their own spiritual preparation for this event, recalling that 6 months earlier a man had lost his life because he simply reached out to steady the ark when David first made arrangements to bring it back to the city. When they reached the city gates, they would command its doors to be opened to allow the ark, the very dwelling place of God among his people, to enter. In hindsight, though, there is another way to view this psalm. Old rabbinic sources said that this psalm was always read on the first day of the week, our Sunday. As Jesus entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, was this very psalm being read in the temple as he was approaching? Who was more fit to ascend to the hill of the Lord and stand in that holy place? The gates of the temple were about to receive the very King of glory, but those in charge of it had already rejected him and conspired to get rid of him. They were unaware that their actions would lead to the completion of the work he came to carry out, to be the God of salvation this psalm spoke of, and to provide the blessing of righteousness to all who would humbly seek his face. Our hands aren't clean, and our hearts aren't pure, but he will take care of that if we let him. He no longer seeks entry in a temple built of stone. We are the temple he wants to enter and dwell in. He calls on each of us to open our hearts and let him take his rightful place. As the book of Revelation records, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Have you let him in?"